If you've ever had your whole day just sidetracked by little distractions, or maybe you work yourself to the point of overexertion, or if you've really overestimated how much you can really get done in a day, then the Pomodoro technique is basically for you. So this will be a step-by-step guide on the Pomodoro technique for beginners. You'll not only understand the basic history of how the Pomodoro technique came to be, but you will also understand how you can apply the Pomodoro technique in whatever work you're doing. And I'm going to tell you why exactly the Pomodoro is so effective at doing its job. The Pomodoro technique was a technique that was essentially invented or pioneered in the 1980s by Francesco Cirrillo. By Francesco Cirrillo. Francesco Cirrillo. The Pomodoro technique was pioneered by Francesco Cirrillo in the 1980s when he was just a university student. What he found was that he struggled to get some work done, and it can be overwhelming when you have 30 different assignments to do and there's just a lot going on. So Francesco, what he ended up doing was he just got himself a tomato-shaped timer. The Pomodoro in Pomodoro technique means tomato. How cool is that? Technically, when you're saying Pomodoro technique, you're saying the tomato technique. So he challenged himself to just work for 10 minutes straight with pure focus on one of the assignments that he had to do. And if he could get through those 10 minutes, he would reward himself with a break. By splitting up his sessions of intense focus and relaxation, he got a lot more done. And that essentially formed the basis of the Pomodoro technique. And so as a result of that really, really key moment in his academic studies, the Pomodoro technique was born. And I think the biggest strength of the Pomodoro technique has to be in how simple it is to do. All you need to work with Pomodoros is you just need to have a timer, you need to have a pen or a pencil, and just some sheets of paper. You basically are just logging how your progress has been going for it. It's very low tech and it's super manageable. You don't have to get any fancy software. You don't have to get a special timer that only works in increments of 25 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever. You can simply use whatever timer you have available to you. You can even use your phone, as long as it has an ability to keep track of time and let you know when the timer runs out. So here are the steps of the Pomodoro technique. First, you pick a task. Second, you set a 25-minute timer to work on that task. And during those 25 minutes, you are only working on that one task. After the timer is up, that's step 3, you get to take a 5-minute break. After 4 Pomodoro cycles, then you get to take a longer 15 or 20-minute break. So what do you do if you get interrupted during a Pomodoro session and it's something that's completely unavoidable? Well, in that case, what you should do is you should take a 5-minute break. So just take your break, get into that flow again, and the purpose for this is so that you just start with a fresh slate the next time you hop in. Getting interrupted, that breaks your flow, and by breaking your flow, you break your momentum. And with interruptions, it is recommended that you do take the time to also mark down when you were interrupted and why those interruptions occurred. So what if you finish your task before your timer is finished? Well, if you finish your task before your timer, you can still use that time. Don't just switch off and then just go into relaxation mode. And don't start scrolling Twitter or going through YouTube. Use that time to still keep exploring the thing that you're learning in that session. Here's some other guidelines that can also help you when you're picking your tasks out for the Pomodoro technique. The first one is to split up your tasks into smaller tasks if you find that you need to take more than 4 Pomodoros to complete them, because you don't want to be working for a really, really long period of time on a Pomodoro session and then ending a study session with realizing that you still haven't completed something tangible. So breaking up your tasks into even smaller subtasks can be a good idea. And this allows you to mark a clear sense of accomplishment, and you have a greater idea of the progress that you're making towards whatever end goal you're working towards. Another thing that you can do is bundle your smaller tasks together. If a task will obviously take less than the duration of a Pomodoro, such as an email out to your boss, it would be really helpful to just bundle those things together in one Pomodoro session, so then that way you can just knock those things out. And finally, remember, the Pomodoro is fixed. Don't break your focus away from what you're working on. It's going to require some commitment. And so in this way, with these guidelines that I've said and the method itself, the Pomodoro technique is a really helpful way of getting your mind in the zone, because oftentimes it can be really overwhelming to just look at a pile of things to do in your to-do list. Once you just get the ball rolling with that first Pomodoro, you're going to be able to do so much more work after that. And cognitive research has shown that when we procrastinate, it's basically because we're trying to avoid any kind of negative feelings that we get around that task. By procrastinating, you're really just delaying it and making your anxiety increase, and that leads you to procrastinate even further. But with the Pomodoro technique, you're able to trick your brain. You're able to go around that limitation, that fear, and basically get the ball rolling with an initial session. And by doing that, by starting small, by starting with something that's really achievable, you're able to get a lot more done. And that's why the Pomodoro method is so effective. Like I've mentioned in my previous video about process versus product, you're not really concerned with the end result of a Pomodoro session. You're more concerned with, did you put in the 25 minutes of time during that first Pomodoro? And if you can do that, then you've pretty much got it set, because any successive session after the first one will be a lot easier. And furthermore, studies have shown that over half of the distractions that come about in our day-to-day lives when we're trying to work on something, those are self-inflicted distractions, meaning you have a choice and you ultimately decide to choose something that's leading you down the path of procrastination. You rationalize the things that are distracting you by saying, oh, it's just a minute of looking through Twitter. That's not really breaking my focus. I can still get my work done. Or it's just an email. It'll take like a second to respond. Those things are actually really they're silent killers. They'll kill your time, and they'll also kill your momentum and prevent you from getting into the flow of things. And let's say you do switch your focus to Twitter or Facebook. What ends up happening is that even when you return back to work, your mind is still going to be preoccupied or still thinking about Facebook or Twitter for the next 20 minutes. That effect of switching your focus has a repercussion that lasts far past when you actually stop using it. Another wonderful thing about the Pomodoro technique is that it's basically gamifying an entire process. You're not really focused on perfection, you're focused on consistency. And consistency is something that everyone can do. You can be consistent in whatever you choose to do, whatever you choose to pursue. You can practice every day, just like one would practice for a sport. You can also do that for training your mind. You can train yourself to handle longer and longer and more frequent Pomodoro sessions. You can start out with a few Pomodoros, and then from that you can build on even more and take on additional Pomodoros. It becomes a sort of game that you play with yourself, and you're able to push yourself even more to get more done. That being said, here are some more tips on how to get more out of the Pomodoro technique in a typical day. Number 1, plan out your Pomodoros in advance. When you start your day, take maybe 15 or 20 minutes to just think and map out what your day is going to look like and when you can fit in these Pomodoro sessions. A little bit of extra pre-planning can really make a difference in whether you're successful in maintaining that momentum that you need. Another thing to consider is that life isn't perfect. We tend to overestimate our abilities sometimes, or maybe underestimate the amount of time it will take us to work on a task. And so the answer to that is to account for it. And the way to account for it is to also schedule in some overflow Pomodoros. And what this will do is give you a little bit more of a buffer period, because you're able to say, okay, well, I thought this would be completed in like 3 Pomodoro cycles, but it turns out I'm going to need a little bit more time. In that way, you can use these extra Pomodoros that you scheduled and shift over that stuff into, okay, well, I guess during my extra period, I can just use this 25-minute block And over time, you'll become more and more comfortable with determining how long it'll take you to do something, and that will also factor into how many Pomodoros you assign yourself throughout the day. You have this level of flexibility, and each time you do a Pomodoro session, you're going to be able to essentially just figure out, okay, this is going to take me this much time. I know it. I know it by the back of my hand. For things that require a little bit more time to get into that sort of focused state, 25 minutes may not be enough. And in that case, there's another great way to modify the existing Pomodoro technique to suit your needs. You can, after you get comfortable with the Pomodoro technique in general, adjust the amount of time you're using as your focus period. So instead of 25 minutes, you can choose to work for 50 minutes straight. When it comes to things that take a little bit more time to get into and require a little bit more focus and are more creative oriented, maybe something like artwork or writing, or even something like programming, you can set a timer for 50 minutes. By adjusting that one variable of the Pomodoro technique, you're able to get a lot more leverage for these different types of tasks. I encourage you to experiment with the Pomodoro technique and find what works best for you. And even if you think that 25 minutes is way too much, you're like, Ishan, no, 25 minutes, I don't have that much willpower or focus. Fear not, there's actually an even easier solution, and that is to try with 5 minutes, try with 10 minutes. Your endurance is sort of like a muscle. You're going to be able to identify with this mindset of, yeah, when I'm working on something during a Pomodoro session, I won't check my emails. I won't be distracted by texts and other notifications. You're going to be in the zone. And one more important thing about taking your breaks during a Pomodoro session, it's easy to just say, let's just take a break right now, and your Pomodoro timer just ran out and you're ready to take your break. Just by switching your focus from one part of the screen to another part of the screen or another window in your screen, you're not really doing yourself that much of a favor when you're taking your break. So really focus on disconnecting completely during that break and maybe get up and move around, and that's really a more effective way to take a break during your Pomodoro sessions. And by doing that, you're able to really truly give yourself a restorative period of relaxation, and that could really go a long way. So by now you should know what the Pomodoro technique is and how you can use it in your studies or in your work to help you get a lot more done throughout your day. Be sure to try it out and let me know how it goes. I'd love to see what you think. And that wraps it up for this video. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.